the changes to the RMA and the concerns that many are voicing to do with what the changes could do and how they could lead to environmental damage. Here's One News Tonight.
Obligations to protect the environment from farming are being watered down as part of the government's first stage of reforming the Resource Management Act. Farmers applying for resource consent will no longer have to demonstrate how their activities will impact water health. And some winter grazing regulations introduced by the previous government will be ripped up. Councils will have requirements to identify significant natural areas suspended for 3 years. Kushla Norman has reaction from farmers and environmentalists.
So farmers have less, they have to be accountable for the water, and identifying significant areas is going to be put on hold for 3 years. So like areas that we need to take care of more, no, we won't worry about that for the next 3 years, which ironically is about the same term that the First National Government's going to be in for.
Carl Dean is preparing plenty of feed for his cows over the cooler months. It's known as winter grazing. At the moment, farmers have to get a resource consent for this.
Just another layer of bureaucracy, another layer of cost that wasn't needed and was not going to add any environmental protection more than what was already happening.
Now the national regulation for winter grazing is being repealed.
People will have seen pictures of cows belly deep in mud in Southland. There are huge environmental impacts on that practice. And there are also very significant animal welfare considerations in play there. So I don't think that repealing that is justifiable in any sense.
We're just saying that we think the rules should be a lot more straightforward and simpler, and that councils with those agricultural communities can make local decisions based upon risk rather than the one-size-fits-all approach.
There are also...
This is something that this government's doing at the moment, Chewie, and we're going to reflect on this when we hear from Mr. Luxon on the AM show from this morning, is when they don't want to be involved with it, they put the responsibility onto a second party. So they don't want to be held responsible for the damage this may do to the environment. So he says very clearly, up to local councils. They can therefore make a bespoke ruling rather than a one-size-fits-all. And what that does for the government, as we'll demonstrate later on this evening when we talk about what Mr. Luxon was talking to the AM show Lloyd Burr this morning about cuts in the public sector, what it means is they get to wipe their hands of these changes and say, well, it's local government's decision, it's not our decision. And it's what they're doing with the cuts. They're saying, well, it's the chief executive who's making those decisions. It's got nothing to do with us. Even though it's kind of like this, Joy, I thought today, it's kind of like, let's say my family owned 6 cars, and let's say I went and sold all 6 of the cars. And then I said to the kids, you're welcome to drive any one of the cars we have, but Dad, you sold the 6 of them. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. You can still drive any car. You know, like the decisions I've made have impacted what they're able to do, but I want to remove myself from the responsibility of my teenager driving a car poorly. What I've just done is I've sold the cars. They can't do it, but I'm still going to put the onus on them not to do it. And that's what they're doing with this. They're basically absolving themselves of responsibility by saying, well, yeah, we put the framework together, but it's the local bodies that end up making the decisions. And what that means is if it turns to custard, they can just point to the local body and go, well, that's what they wanted. You know, we're not going to step in their way. It's what they wanted. So that's what they're doing a lot at the moment, Chewie, in other legislation as well.
When it comes to winter grazing, I hate it.
Yeah,
I hate it. Any sort of thing that ends up with your stock looking like they're in some sort of concentration camp, you should probably do something about. It seems to be a southern South Island thing, and it seems to be something that these old duffers have got used to as kind of an accepted practice. It shouldn't be. It's bad for the animals. It's bad for the waterways. There's a reason that it was taken out. And this is just pandering to that segment of farmers that don't want to innovate, that don't want to do better, that just want to do things the way that they want, as they have done for generations.
Is it a practice that's more common in the bottom half of the South Island because of the conditions, like for growing? Like the top half of the North Island, obviously better growing conditions all year round, so maybe not the need for it. Could it be that, or do you really think it's just practice and what they've got used to and refuse to change?
I am not an expert when it comes to this sort of stuff, so I'm not going to pretend that I am. I think a lot of the pushback against those changes to the RMA and getting rid of winter grazing National's argument was you can't just do one size fits all. The circumstances and the conditions are different in the North Island than they are in the South Island. But ultimately, I haven't seen an argument from farmers that seems justifiable when you look at these pictures of these animals just soaking in a good 2 or 3 feet of mud. From an animal welfare point of view, it doesn't seem like a good idea. From an optics point of view, it doesn't look like a good idea. I mean, anecdotally, I saw a story of a tourist from Germany going through that Southland and being absolutely appalled that is how we look after our animals, because that's just something that would not fly in the EU.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going and see what else the story wants to reveal to us. Reveal your worst, story.
It's all approach.
There are also changes for fencing off waterways.
So where there was low intensity farming, which is around some beef cattle, but predominantly in deer, those rules are being pulled back. But where there's intensive farming, dairy is an example, the requirements still stay in place.
So that says to me, Chewy, low intensity farming, fewer animals per hectare. But that doesn't mean that all the animals now still can't walk into the rivers and shit everywhere. Yeah, okay, so there'll only be 50 rather than 500, but that'll still massively damage our waterways if those are being reduced. And I think this is an example that what you've just said, it just comes back to lazy farming. I mean, this comes back to lazy farming, and it doesn't have to happen this way, but that just makes it easier for people who just don't want to give a shit, literally and figuratively, about their streams.
It's among a raft of changes to the Resource Management Act and Labour's environmental regulations.
It is a package of short-term measures to appease those farmers, but also it's just the start, though, of a whole lot of permissions for a lot more extractive, environmentally unfriendly and polluting activity.
Federated Farmers says it marks an end to what it calls the war on farming. But environmentalists say...
Just remember, Federated Farmers said when Jacinda Ardern left politics that farmers are losing a friend. So they said that then. They're now suggesting that a politician who was a friend to farmers was running a war on farmers. There seems to be a juxtaposition in the commenting there.
It's now the war on nature that's ramping up.
Effectively, if you're going to allow rural New Zealand to conduct its activities without proper environmental oversight and protections, that's in effect a subsidy.
The best critic of a farmer is another farmer. If we see a neighbour that's not performing, we'll go...
Really? Really? The best critic of a farmer is another farmer. So if both of the farmers are dirty, they're going to be the best critics of each other? Don't know if that stands.
Tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, pull your socks up.
The proposed law changes will be introduced to Parliament next month. Kushla Norman, One News.
I'm still with you. I was just taking
demand for online
taking a photo of my dog. So there we go. Chewy, your thoughts? I mean, the RMA is changing, danger to the environment. Farmers are going to be able to pollute more easily, and the farmers themselves are going, well, but we won't, because we'll hold each other accountable. That's pretty much the sum total of that story.
Do you remember what a big issue river water quality was a few years ago?
Yeah.
It's going to be another issue. We're going to get back to the fact that E. coli counts in our rivers are going to go up. Look, there, and I don't want to tar all farmers with the same brush, and I don't want to lump into it this whole war on farmers. Being in New Zealand and saying that there's a war on farmers is just such a ridiculously overblown rhetoric, and is just really playing into their urban-rural divide and conquer thing, which is just absolute nonsense. What this is pointing out that our agricultural sector has changed so much in the last 30 years, maybe 40 years, where we were primarily sheep farming, and then we've transitioned to the much more profitable dairy farming.
Yeah.
And sheep can graze pasture that does not need the intensive irrigation and do not output as much into the environment. Southland's always been pretty heavy dairy, but you see that creep into Canterbury, which is able to be very drought prone. And because it's all alluvial floodplains and that sort of thing, it just goes straight into the river. You can't drink the river water anymore. You can't drink like there is a constant water quality warning out where my family have a batch at the Rangitata River, and it's surrounded by dairy farms now where it was all sheep. And I just think, farmers by the nature of their work are quite independent people, and they'll just get out and do stuff, and they don't appreciate people telling them what to do. And I don't think there's a lot of people that like being told what to do, but sometimes when you're being a dickhead and you're just doing stuff because it's always the way it's been done, and someone comes in and goes, hey, the rivers are fucked, and we need you to do this thing, excuse me, then they're going to go, oh, it's a war on farming. I've got to do more compliance. Now, there's lots of farmers out there that are replanting their riverbanks, that are letting native bush regenerate in low quality areas and gullies and stuff like that. I'm going to do it again. And all credit to them. And it's one of those things that, like, if that farmer's going around and pointing at his neighbors and going, you're doing a shit job, it's not working.
That's it. You got it. My mum used to say 1 for a wish, 2 for a kiss, 3 for a letter, 4 for something better. So you're either getting a letter if you.
Oh, I'm on a run.
Something better. What about the old bullshit idea about like best people hold a farmer accountable as another farmer? In what industry in the world does that work? Like in what industry in the world is the regulators the best people to regulate and keep an eye on it? The people who then profit from the same system. I mean, come on. I mean, actually said that with a straight face. Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, and look, a peer criticizing you, yes, it can be a powerful motivator, but it's also incredibly regional.
Yeah, and they can't do anything about it. If your neighbor goes, pull your socks up, and you go, whereas an agency that has the ability to put on some kind of sanctions might be a better person to get him to pull his socks up.
I don't get it. I want farmers to get on the same page as the rest of us and see that if they want to consider that there's a war on farmers, that there sometimes is a perception problem from their end. Their federated farmers are not doing themselves any favors by trying to argue a picture of intensive winter grazing and going, this is fine, thank you.
Yeah.
And they're not doing, I think the groundswell movement did people's perception of farmers incredible damage. And they're not seeing it.
Yeah. No.
New Zealand is an incredibly supportive place for farmers. Their economy is built on it.
Yeah.
I think they're being sold a bill of goods if they believe that the urban-rural divide is the people that live in cities don't know where their food comes from and don't like farmers. But they're just not getting it. And federated farmers needs to realise this. And they need to sort of go, hey, guys, you might not be happy with us, but we have to find a middle ground. We have to find a way forward. We have to rehabilitate our image a little bit here.
Yeah. Or they don't give a shit because really when it comes down to it, it's just a commercial entity. And if they can get away with an extra 10% profit by being assholes, they'll do that. That's what I think when I hear farmers will regulate farmers.
There's not a business in the world that says, yeah, more regulation will be good things. Yeah. They always fight it. But again, I think they're being used for political gain again by stoking that divide. Then you get your culture war aspects coming through, and the right has been very good at weaponizing that against the left.
Yep. And bless you, Chewy, from Mr. Arvids, just so you know, just in case you were wondering.
Yes. Thank you.
Kia ora again, whānau. The clip you've just watched is brought to you today by our patrons. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to get behind what we're doing, if you're enjoying our content and wanting to share our content, then maybe you would consider being a patron to Big Hairy News. Head to www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News to sign up to one of our levels and be a patron. At this point, we are only a listener and viewer supported show. It all comes down to you guys. If you feel like jumping on board to help, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Hooroo!